Hello, my name is Delia Bousquet, and today I'll be presenting my fishery management plan. So just to give an overview of how this will go, I'll begin with my introduction. I'll explain some of the mathematical methods that go into the management plan and then go into the analysis of it, and then finally present my conclusions. So begin with the introduction. So the scenario. The government conducted a census on the state of the codfish population. This was conducted to ensure the population remains healthy and stable. Too many fish can hurt an ecosystem, and an ecosystem is very connected through food chains, and too little fish from overfishing can have major consequences both economically and ecologically. The main question that is guiding this investigation is how can populations of cod be sustainably caught to maintain a healthy population level. And on the screen, you can see kind of the main data that I'll be working with in this presentation. We have matrix L, which is the original data representing the cod population, which I'll get into explaining a little later, and then matrix F, which is some proposed new technology changes. So the summary of results, just to give a quick little recap of what I did. The major results found that the natural population of codfish will increase at an exponential rate starting in about 8 years. This will increase unbounded if left untouched, which could be detrimental to the ocean waters that could become overrun by cod. The new fishing technology effectively leveled out the population of cod at about 770 total fish at the 8-year mark, continuing unbounded. My new sustainable fishing regime leveled out the cod population to live in harmony in the ocean, allowing more cod to be caught each year and facilitating sustainable growth of the cod population over time. Okay, now I'll get into some of the mathematical methods that are needed to do this analysis. So the most important element of all of this is the population vectors and transition matrices, which can easily be explained through an example of the butterfly life cycle. So I'm going to take it away from fish for a quick second just to explain the logistics of all this, because the cod example is a little more complicated than butterflies, and the butterflies nicely break up into life stages of 4. And you also can have what they call age-structured matrices, which are ages like in the cod example. So instead of an egg, you could have a 0 to 2 age group, but it's much easier to explain this in life stage or in like stages of life. So we'll do that here. So population vectors provide organization for the number of organisms in each type of life stage or age groups. So on the screen, this is vector P of X, where there are 100 eggs, 500 larvae, 400 pupae, and 200 adults. So we can see population vector px right here at the top of the screen. This organization makes it easy to find the total population, subsets of the population in each life stage total very easily as they're listed in order of life cycle. So you can see here it's very easy to just be able to quickly glance over at that population vector and get a breakdown pretty quickly of the life stages. Continuing on, populations often change over time due to certain life stages being like eaten or dying for some reason, and this is where transition matrices come into play. The transition matrices allow these changes to be modeled over time and see how the population of each life stage changes. So life would not be life without changes. So a population vector is not always going to be the same in the real world. So that's where we have our transition matrices. And these changes observed in the wild can be mapped by linear equations, which then can be modeled into a matrix. So on the screen, we can see this kind of block of text that's right here, which explains like some, let's say scientists went out and made these observations. And so these are kind of the word versions, which are then put into these equations here. So for example, it says half of the eggs become caterpillars. So we can see that they have an equation right here. And then they do this for each of the life stages kind of going through life. And then you can do the fun part of taking these equations and putting them into a matrix. And this butterfly example was created by John Hopkins CTY, so this is not my example, but I did create this matrix here from this example that they provided. The matrix we put together, T of X, is broken down into eggs, caterpillars, pupae, and adults, in that order, going across the columns in rows. So we can go down, so this is eggs, this is the caterpillars, then the pupae, then the adults, and then same way going down the columns. So starting in the second row, so not the first row, we'll start in the second row because it's a little easier to start there. We can see that 0.5 of the eggs become caterpillars. So we're in the eggs column, we start in the eggs column, and then we're saying of the eggs, 0.5 survive to become caterpillars. Then moving down, we see that 3/4 of the caterpillars become pupae, and then moving down again, half of the pupae become adults. And then this 0.2, you're like, Delia, why didn't we move down another row? Well, that's because the adults, you can't get any older than the adult. So we're saying that 0.2%, or not percent, 0.2 of the adults survive. And as you can see, the row indicates like the starting stage. So like an egg in this 0.5 example, we're starting as an egg, and then the row indicates what we're becoming. So we're an egg column, and then of the eggs, 0.5 become the caterpillars. And where this kind of becomes a little more complicated is in this first row. You're like, what does this 6 mean? So it's a little more complicated. What we're saying here in this first egg row and adult column is that like we say up here, an adult is laying 30 eggs each, but only 0.2 of the adults survive. So of the adults, we have to multiply them by 0.2. So that's a fifth of all the adults survive. So of the 30 eggs, we have to multiply that by 0.2, and we get 6 because only 0.2 survive. So we're not going to have 30 eggs from everyone. And the transition matrices and population vectors can be broken down by stages, like I was saying earlier, with like the butterflies in ages. Or ages, like I was even saying earlier, like the age-structured matrix. So this is the stage-structured transition matrix, but later with the cod example, we'll see an age-structured matrix where it's like a 0 to 2, 2 to 4. We'll see that later. To model the future using a transition matrix, one simply needs to just multiply the transition matrix by the population vector to get a new population. I quickly did this with Symbolab, which is like an online algebra tool, just to do a quick demonstration and to show what the butterfly population would look like in 1 year. To compute more years in the future, one just simply needs to square the transition matrix, or to the third, to the fourth, just raise it to the power of the amount of years you want to go into the future, and then multiply by the population vector. So it's very easy to continue going like 3, 4, 5 more years out in the future. Pretty simple. And transition matrices are really good at modeling the future well, and the past not so much, as we'll see in the coming slides. So just looking here, so this is just 1 year out because we're not raising the transition matrix T of X to any power. Then we're multiplying by P of X, the initial population vector, and then getting P prime of X, which is right here. So we can see how that population changed here to get that. Okay. Okay, so a comparison of other models. So I'll now go into some of the benefits and drawbacks of using the transition matrices over other models like the exponential model. And the purpose of this is to show why the matrix model is used in the fishery management plan, as well as provide some insight to the benefits of using it. Just to provide an example of what an exponential model versus a matrix graph looks like, I've placed them both on the screen for a visual comparison. They're nothing to do with the fish or the butterflies. It's just simply to see what each of them looks like visually, kind of remind us like the differences. Yeah. So we can see, they're also different examples, by the way. So this is not like, they're not the same example. They're just to give the sense of visuals of each graph. So as we can see with the matrix graph right here, we can see an oscillation kind of happening until we reach a steady state. And that's very different from the exponential model that we see here, which kind of just, as you can see, just increases at an increasing rate over time. So very different models, and we'll be discussing the pros of the matrix one. So getting into that. So number one pro is that the matrix model has life stage differentiation and allows the displaying of various life stages and how each is impacted over time. This is beneficial for modeling populations with skewed distributions of life stages, such as in Japan, where there's a rising number of elderly individuals. An exponential model would not be able to show this breakdown because it's just an overall growth rate. So with our matrix model, we can see, oh, the adults are only like surviving at a 0.2 rate versus like the kids are doing much better. And you can even break that down further if you wanted to use an age structured model where you're like, oh, from 80 to 82, the people in that age group are dying much faster than 83 to 84. And you can go and break it down very further to kind of see what's going on in terms of like age or life stage. And number two, the realistic consideration of factors. Matrix models better account for factors like food supply, predators, and challenges at individual life stages, providing a more realistic kind of showing of what's happening in the world. Because the world is definitely not perfect and there's not just a general growth rate of what's going on. So this is kind of crucial for understanding population beyond just a general growth rate. And then number three, chain-like birth and death rates. Matrix models allow for the incorporation of birth and death rates in a chain-like sequence, offering a deeper understanding of population growth. This variation reflects the dynamics based on a specific number of organisms within each life stage. So when we think about the world, we kind of move through life in a flowy-like nature. It's not just like, oh, you're a kid, and then you're an adult. Like there's stages of life, and you can see kind of how, like of the kids, 0.75 survive to become middle age, and kind of see how that like flowy, and when you do it with ages, it's even better because you're like, oh, from the 0 to 2-year-olds, like 0.75 survive to become the 2 to 4, like, and on like that, and kind of see, you can see, oh, this age group's not doing so well compared to this age group, and kind of have targeted efforts there. And that kind of gets into my fourth point, management and conservation modeling. So you can really see the areas of life where people or animals are struggling. And so you can be like, oh, the 80 to 82 population isn't doing so well, and kind of see and kind of have a tailored approach that is not really achievable with exponential models, which kind of just give the entire population. And then number five, realistic growth. The main drawback of exponential models is their assumption of perpetual growth at an increasing rate. So this is kind of unrealistic in biology, as most populations kind of reach a steady state, as we can see on this first graph here, due to factors like limited resources of food and land. Like imagine if the human population was just increasing exponentially. That would be like really bad because we'd run out of land and food. So eventually we're going to have to reach a leveling off point. There's going to be things that level it out, whether that be like diseases, all of that stuff. And matrix models have the capability to kind of determine a steady state population vector using eigenvalues and provide kind of a more realistic representation of population growth over time. And as we'll get and see throughout this presentation, the matrix models aren't perfect. Just in general, not even just comparing them with the exponential model, but they do a lot better than the exponential models in many examples. So, comparison with other models, the cons. So, as I was leading to on the slide just before this, there are a good number of cons with the matrix model, one being that it assumes that all of the population is female and capable of reproducing. But just focusing on the cons, comparing it to the exponential model, I would say the first con would be the data intensity. So matrix models demand much more detailed observations and data, requiring knowledge of birth and death rates for each life stage. This leads to data intensity and a lot of potential for errors in data collection, posing like challenges for accurate model construction. So you may have a lot of data, but with more data becomes more errors, and maybe you did some calculations along the way, and there's just a lot of room for mistakes versus with just a general, like very easy exponential model. There's less data, it's just one general growth rate, and yeah, much easier to kind of calculate. And then that gets into number two, computational complexity. So for complex and large populations with numerous life stages, as I was hinting at on the other slide, if you wanted to do one for human life, if you broke it down by 2 years and you went through 100, that'd be like 50 different stages, like 0 to 2, 2 to 4, like so many. And again, a lot of calculations that would have to be involved, and it can become very intricate and challenging, especially when compared to just the simple exponential growth model that's not broken down into age stages. And like if you have a super complicated life stage model and like a matrix model, it poses a lot of challenges for researchers with that may have like limited computing power. As we'll see, these problems are complicated just in the small version, so I imagine doing this with huge sums of data would be very tedious for a computer and definitely not possible by a human. All right, now we're going to get into some more matrices. We're going to do some matrix operations and kind of explain kind of what's going on with that before we jump into the management plan. So to start off, we'll talk about some scalar multiples. So scalar multiples of transition matrices involve scaling the transition rates uniformly by a constant factor. So to break that down in very simple terms, we have a transition matrix, which is right here, matrix L. We also have one here, matrix F, and the transition rates are just kind of the individual entries, so 0, 1, 1.9, so on, you get it. And when we take a constant, we're just multiplying that by all the individual inputs in the transition matrix. And for example, if we double the transition rates, it implies that all birth and death rates within the population are doubled. And then the effect on long-term behavior, scalar multiples maintain the proportionality of birth and death rates within the population. This means that while the rates themselves change, the relative balance between births and deaths remains the same. Consequently, long-term behaviors such as population growth or decline may be accelerated or decelerated, but overall the pattern remains consistent. So basically kind of the proportionality between all these numbers in the matrix and kind of the flow, I guess, of the entire system stays the same, and we're not changing kind of the proportionality and birth and death rates. So example, in the context of fishing technology scenario, which we'll get into a little later, but we have just an example that has nothing to do with the management plan, but kind of just showing how it would work using the data we have now. If a new proposal of technology says they wanted to double the survival rates and like not just the survival rates, but just double everything within the transition matrix, it would be like applying a scalar multiple to the overall transition matrix of 2. And as we can see here, I kind of did out the math for you for that. So we take the 2 and just multiply it by every single input in the matrix, and then we do out the math and get CL. And L, once again, is the original data, and C, that's that constant of 2 here. This could lead to a faster population growth rate and death rate, potentially exacerbating overfishing if not managed correctly. So we're just taking all the rates and doubling them, and you're going to have more fish, you're going to have more death, just more of everything. Because it's, as I said, the balance is not being changed, we're just getting more of it. We're going to have more fish, more everything. Well, actually not more fish, because we're not changing the population vector, but just more of the changes to the fish, if you get what I mean. And then getting into matrix sums. So matrix sums involve adding or subtracting values to each entry of the matrix, altering the transition rates independently. Unlike scalar multiples, the effect on each rate may vary, affecting the overall flow of the population. So with matrix sums, we're changing individual entries. So when we're taking a transition matrix and subtracting a transition matrix of the same size. And So that you're changing individual entries, which means you're going to change the overall proportionality between the numbers and changing the flow of the entire system. So matrix sums alter the proportionality flow, like I was just saying, leading to significant changes in long-term behavior. Depending on the adjustments made, the population dynamics such as growth rate, age distribution, and stability can be profoundly affected, which can change the entire makeup of a population. So maybe the initial transition matrix made the population grow infinitely and just keep growing and growing. By changing individual entries, you can significantly change a population. You can level it out completely. You can have it have less growth over time. There's a lot you can do. It's kind of crazy. And we'll see how transition matrices can be altered later in the new proposed fishing technology. And we'll see how these changes of matrix sums can affect that. So an example is using the we'll get into a lobbyist that is proposing some new fishing technology later, which is this matrix F. And we'll discuss matrix F a little later, but just to show some matrix sums real quick, if we take our original data and then subtract the proposed changes, so that's L minus F, we see how each individual entry gets subtracted by a specific value from F, leading us to our final transition matrix here, our new technology leading to L prime. And as I was saying, the long-term effect could be a shift in age structure of the fish population, potentially impacting overall population growth and sustainability. So these matrix sums and scalar multiples are very important and change the future of fish and just overall like life if we're not talking about fish, because transition matrices it's a very delicate balance, and when you touch the balance, the entire system gets affected. Now we'll get into our final explanation slide of kind of the mathematical parts. Oh, my dog's here. And if we understand the transition matrix as representing a linear transformation, it transforms the space of population age distributions. Each column of the transition matrix represents the age distribution of the population at a certain time, example like year, while the row represents the age distribution of the population in the subsequent time period after one transition step. And the significance of the rank of a transition matrix in terms of understanding population structure and long-term population dynamics lies in its ability to capture the dimensionality of the population space. The rank of a transition matrix indicates the maximum number of linearly independent columns or rows in the matrix, which correspond to the number of distinct age classes or stages in the population. For example, if the rank is equal to the number of age classes in the population, it implies that each age class contributes independently to the population dynamics. If the rank is less than the number of age classes, it suggests that some age classes are dependent on others due to the shared demographic process or constraints. A transition matrix with full rank, that means equal to the number of age classes, indicates a stable population structure where each age class contributes uniquely to population growth or decline. In contrast, a transition matrix with reduced rank may indicate dependencies or feedback loops within the population structure, potentially leading to a less predictable long-term dynamic. In addition, the rank of a matrix can make it more sensitive to changes, and higher rank matrices often exhibit greater resilience to slight changes, as changes in one age class are less likely to affect the entire population structure. Lower ranked matrices, on the other hand, may be more sensitive to changes, leading to amplified effects on population dynamics. So just looking at our little slide here, we can see matrix L, that's the original data as a reminder, in row echelon form. And we can see, so to know the rank of a matrix in row echelon form, you just want to check to see if there's any 0 rows, real simple. And we can see here that we have all 0 rows, meaning that our rank is 5 and it's a full rank. And then we have here just a quick example and reminder of what a linear transformation looks like on the grid. So we're effectively kind of just shifting the grid, that's a good way for it, and kind of changing what it looks like. All right, let's get into our analysis. All right, so now that we know all about the mathematical methods of age-structured transition matrices, we can now explain what's going on in the cod transition matrix. As seen on the screen, there are 5 different age groupings. To model the reproduction and survival rates, I made this colorful graphic here, right on the right-hand side of the screen, and I'm going to walk through it. So basically, so we can see on our top row, we have our 0 to 2 age group. So in the 0 to 2 age group, 0 of the eggs are going to, or the 0 to 2 are going to contribute to the 0 to 2. So like when we're talking about the 0 to 2 group, we're talking about like babies. So what age groups are going to have babies? Or eggs, I guess in the cod's case, they're going to have eggs. So no eggs are going to have eggs, so that's why there's 0 of the eggs contributing to the eggs. But then we get to the 2 to 4 group, and then we're going to say that there's going to be 1 egg for the 2 to 4 group, 1. And then for the 4 to 6, that's 1.9 contributing. And then 6 to 8, that is the 1.7. And then 8 plus 0, each one is going to have 0. So when we say like 1.9, we're saying like each cod is going to have 1.9 eggs. So that's where those numbers come from and what they mean. Then moving on to the 2 to 4 group, we can see that we're not like getting 2 to 4 from another group because that doesn't make sense. When you have eggs, they don't magically become 2 to 4, or I guess when you say you're not birthing a 2 to 4-year-old. So the only way to get to 2 to 4 is by eggs surviving. So of the eggs in the 0 to 2 group, 0.61 survived in the 2 to 4 group. So 0.61 of the eggs survived. And then moving on to the 4 to 6, 0.33 of the 2 to 4-year-olds become 4 to 6. And then the 6 to 8, 0.21 of the 4 to 6 survived to 6 to 8. And of the 6 to 8, 0.13 survive to become the 8 plus. And then you're like, why is this here? Well, that's because the 8 plus is the oldest age group, and of the 8 plus, 0.08 survive to become 8 plus again. So they survive again. And so that's kind of what all these numbers mean. So as I was saying at the beginning, the row indicates the age group, and the column also indicates age group. So it's very easy just to construct a grid to be like, you're an egg and you're moving into the you're a 0 to 2 moving into the 2 to 4. You're 2 to 4 moving into the 4 to 6. And then just matching up the columns as such. Okay. So now we'll get into the future prediction. So using this transition matrix, that's matrix L with the original data, we can model what the cod population would look like in 20 years. I raised the initial L matrix to the 10th power because this is a 2-year time step. So 10 actually equals 20. So 10 time steps equals 20 years. Using Symbolab, I ran this calculation where I multiplied the matrix by the initial population vector after raising the initial matrix to the 10th power. So we take matrix L, we raise it to the 10th power, and then multiply it by the initial population vector here. And then I did this because it would have been extremely inefficient to do actual math for this, because raising a matrix to the 10th power involves multiplying it out 10 times, which is extremely challenging. So we just skipped right to the technology. And using a diagonalization method would have been preferred, as that makes it much easier to raise matrices to high powers. However, that would have resulted in imaginary numbers in complex decimals in this case. So that wasn't really the easiest method as well. So technology was definitely needed in this case. And I found the population in 20 years to be 978 cod, rounded since one cannot have a non-integer number of cod. As a reminder, the population started with 747 cod, so it increased at a pretty large amount. And you can see the solution vector right here, and you can see the breakdown by the age groups, which are 0 to 2, 2 to 4, etc. And then rounded to the nearest fish right here on the right. And just a reminder, time step is 2 years. So the past predictions. This model does not work well for estimating past populations. As seen on the screen, I ran the calculations for 4 years ago and encountered the 4 to 6 age group having about negative 2,135 cod in it. Obviously, one cannot have negative anything in a population, so this prediction isn't accurate. However, as seen using the model, it can be predicted that the total cod population was 15,419 cod, a significant increase from the 747 in year 0. This prediction doesn't seem that accurate as the model's long-term behavior, as we'll see in a few slides, is like an exponential growth. So having a larger population in the past doesn't make any sense as the population is just increasing over time. So if it was increasing in the past, it'd be more of like a parabola kind of deal, which doesn't really make sense at all. And just to review what's happening on our slides with our work, we are taking matrix L, our original data, and raising it to the negative second power. So that means that we're taking the inverse and then squaring that, and then multiplying by our initial P population vector. And then our solutions right here. And I did this all out by hand. It was so much fun. And basically, to find the inverse, we take our population, our original L matrix, and then we put the identity matrix on the right, and then we just row reduce until we switch the identity matrix to be on the left-hand side, which happens right on this step after we do all these row reduction steps to get our final our final matrix right here. And then we have to then square that inverse because it's to the negative second power, and then multiply that by the initial population vector to finally get this answer right here, our solution, which we then round and then add up to get 15,419. Okay. Now let's get into the proposed technology. So the new fishing technology proposed creates the new matrix L prime as we ourselves did the math out on our matrix sum slash linear transformation slide. So this is just a reminder of the math that we did to get L prime. So we took matrix L, subtracted matrix F, which is the proposed fishing technology, to get its effect on the cod population. And just to see how that changes our graphic, this is just the graphic that I had originally explaining matrix L and highlighted in yellow are the new changes. So we can see that the 4 to 6 having eggs is much smaller at 0.18, and then we see that, or that should be 1.8, 1.8 having eggs, and then the 2 to 4-year-olds surviving are 0.29, and then the 4 to 6 surviving are 0.19. So some changed rates. Doesn't look that significant on this slide, but as we'll see, actually is quite significant. It only changed by a little, but a little actually did a lot. So as I was hinting to earlier, we do have a lobbyist, and where this comes into play is involving our F matrix that we were discussing just on the previous slide. So a lobbyist presents some calculations to me showing that F cubed equals 0. They argue because of this, the new fishing technology will not have an impact after 6 years, 3 time steps in the model. The lobbyist, so then my job was to make some calculations to disprove or prove the lobbyist. So just looking at our algebra here, this is our F matrix, and then I did all the algebra out to cube it, and it is in fact all zeros. But, so yes, the lobbyist is correct that F cubed equals 0. However, as we just saw on the previous slide, L prime is the effect on the overall population of fish. That is L minus F, as we saw. While the new fishing technology may have no impact after the 6th year, it did have effect for the first 6 years, effectively changing the trajectory of the fish population that was once increasing exponentially in the long term to move up to a steady state in the long term, as we'll see on the next slide. This flattening out happens because of F's initial effect on L in the first 6 years. L prime continues after the effects of F because L prime does not cube to 0 as seen on the left and continues on, and it does eventually reach a steady state, not initially after the 6 years as we'll see on the graph on the next slide, but fairly quickly after that. So as we saw, L prime cubed is here, does not, this is the result, that does not equal 0. So here we have our much anticipated graph. And this graph shows the end behavior of the L prime matrix is that it levels out and continues on forever. So our L prime matrix is this orange line here, that's our scenario 2, that's our new technology. So this is not F. F is not a scenario, it's just a thing that affects L. So reminder, L prime is L minus F. And then we see at our 3 time step marker, which is actually 6 years, that the graph is not fully leveled out. It's still fluctuating until around, I'd say probably the 8-year mark. I think that's when it levels out, just eyeballing it. So we can see that F kind of is doing all this crazy stuff, and then once F is gone, it starts to level out. So F may be gone, but L prime is not, as we saw with the algebra on the previous slide. And now we'll get into the code behind that graph just to see some of the work behind it. And as a reminder, this data comes from taking the matrices as indicated by the scenarios, matrix L, L prime, and L prime prime, and completing the matrix algebra as demonstrated before, where the matrix is raised to the corresponding power for a time step and then multiplied by the initial population vector, P initial of X. So this is the code/work that I used to get the graph, and this was done in Mathematica. So the proposed new technology effectively levels out the cod population. My new method is similar in that it aims to control the cod population so it does not increase at a drastic rate like in matrix L prime. However, it encourages the cod population to grow slightly over time. This is because historically the cod population has been overfished, and in order to ensure the sustainability of the population, it needs to increase to return closer to pre-overfishing levels. Additionally, my new matrix takes into account the trend of cod population reaching maturity to have eggs earlier due to the stress of overfishing. This was recently discovered this past summer and published by the U.S. National Science Foundation. It is unclear exactly how much this affects the number of eggs produced. However, I adjusted the 2 to 4 age group to produce 0.2 more eggs in this scenario. In order to maximize the number of fish caught, I mainly targeted older fish and eliminated the oldest age group. The most babies/eggs are produced by the 4 to 6 group, so it is important to leave this group relatively unaffected. The 2 to 4 and 0 to 2 age groups feed into the 4 to 6 age group, so they must also be left at similar levels. The 6 to 8 and 8 plus age group don't affect the system as much, so these are least important. These changes effectively stabilize the overall population while also offering some growth over time, which, as stated earlier, is needed to recover the population. So if we take a look, I just did some matrix algebra. This was how we created the L prime / new technology method. And then my method, I just altered F to create F prime. And this is my new method right here. And then as a reminder, F does not actually change the cod. We have to subtract F from L. So I subtracted my F prime from L to get L prime prime, which is the new method. And just to run through L prime prime and what it means, we are producing 0.2 more babies from the 2 to 4 group, and then 1.9 from the 4 to 6 group, and then 6 to 8, 1.7. So these are all similar numbers. And remember, these are all the total number of eggs from each age group. And then 0.61 of the eggs are surviving, 0.61 of the 0 to 2 are surviving to the 2 to 4. And then this is a change here at 0.25 instead of 0.29, are surviving to become the 4 to 6, and then no one's surviving anymore. We're catching them all here. So that is the new L prime prime. Okay, so how many fish? So because my new sustainable fishing regime will increase the cod population over time, this also means that the number of harvested fish will also increase slightly over time. This is a good method because businesses want to grow and the overall population of the world is growing, so allowing more fish to be caught each year is extremely helpful. Because of this, it is impossible to give an exact number of fish shall be caught each year because it will change. However, initially the number of fish caught will fluctuate more or less until the population growth levels off. From year 0 to year 4, that is 2 time steps, the number of fish caught will be 203. So the way I calculated this is I took L prime prime, my new method, and I squared it and multiplied it by the initial population vector, and we can see that math out here, and then it resulted in this result. And then to get the number of fish, I took the initial population vector and subtracted it from this one, and I only included times the age groups of the 8 plus and the bottom 3 because those were the ones that I altered to have to be fishing from. So that means I was subtracting my F prime matrix was subtracting from L in that example. Because there was an example in my F prime matrix where I was actually adding more eggs, and to that egg age group, if we remember the initial F prime matrix, it had a negative 0.02, so when you subtract, it actually added eggs. So we can't include that part as fishing when we're counting how many fish because that doesn't really make sense. We're also not fishing from that age group. We're only fishing from the bottom 3 age groups. So the way you just do it is I took the bottom 3 age groups and just subtracted. And the reason we're not doing the 2 to 4 age group is because I did not alter that in any way. It's just the original survival rate. We're not changing the survival rate. It's the same as it was before in L, so we're all good there. So I only altered the survival rates for the bottom 3 age groups. So that's how we know how many are surviving or dying. And so the survival rates are 0 for all of these, so we know they're being caught. So we just do our subtraction, and then we got 76, 76, and 51. We add, and we get 203. So going back to our graph, well, this is a slightly different version of our graph. This is over 200 years. So this graph shows the long-term trends on the populations, illustrating what I was talking about on the previous slide. The new technology levels off the population, as we saw before. So that's scenario 2 on the orange line. And the blue line showing the normal cod population shows the exponential growth I was also discussing. My green line scenario, that is scenario 3, green, and with the L prime prime matrix, allows both scenarios to have the best of each and allows some growth while also fishing and having a sustainable level. On to the conclusion. The major results of the study found that the natural population of codfish will increase at an exponential rate starting in about 8 years. This will increase unbounded if left untouched, which could be detrimental to ocean waters that could be overrun by cod. The new fishing technology effectively leveled out the population of cod at about 770 total fish at the 8-year mark and continuing unbounded. My new sustainable fishing regime leveled out the cod population to live in harmony with the ocean, allowing more cod to be caught each year and facilitating sustainable growth of the cod population over time. Initially, 203 fish can be caught, leveling out to a more consistent rate after a few years. Overall, my recommendation would be that letting the cod population continue on as normal in scenario 1 would be detrimental to the ocean as they could take over the ecosystem and affect biodiversity. Scenario 2 with the new technology leaves the cod population very low and susceptible to being harmed by overfishing in the future. My recommendation would be to pursue Scenario 3 or to create another option similar where the population of cod can grow somewhat from its history of overfishing and have the number of cod caught per year to increase slightly over time to account for the human population growing. I learned during this process the delicate balance of habitats and how easily they can be affected by changing the birth and death rates of different life stages. I also learned how cumbersome the nature of using matrix models and matrix algebra can be when being done repetitively with a lot of decimals. The phenomena relevant to the cod population that the matrix model leaves out are significant. The model assumes consistent survival and birth rates over time, which are unrealistic in a changing world affected by many factors such as environmental variability, predator-prey interactions, fishing pressure, habitat degradation, and climate change. Another major oversight is the assumption that every cod is capable of reproducing, ignoring the fact that male cod cannot lay eggs. These factors challenge the conclusion that all models will eventually reach a steady state. Those are matrix models. Birth and death rates will fluctuate over time due to various factors, leading to fluctuation in the cod population from year to year. These dynamic factors make it impossible to create an accurate model using this matrix approach because of the underlying rates crucial to the model that will continually change. Furthermore, the model incorrectly represents half of the cod population, that is, the males, making the population appear larger than they actually are, as males cannot contribute to reproduction but can die, which changes the birth rate and overall population. This model both reveals and conceals aspects of real-life dynamics. While it shows the overall population and provides a breakdown by age, it does a poor job of representing fish being caught and other overall changes as just stated. Although it offers a better depiction than exponential models, it still falls short of capturing the complete picture. Models like these obscure the realities of animal interactions with the changing environment, making it nearly impossible to find a model that encompasses all aspects. The matrix model relies on many assumptions, creating an idealized scenario. Despite its limitations, the model effectively illustrates a generic age-structured model demonstrating how fish move through life via basic factors such as being caught, dying, and reproducing at a generic rate. If these phenomena were considered, it would strengthen my conclusions, making them more realistic and accurate in the real world. However, based on just using the matrix model in its generalized form, these conclusions cannot be entirely made with 100% accuracy, taking into the many factors that were not accounted for. The model is heavily reliant on computing power. Just calculating a few steps in the model requires multiplying matrices many times, resulting in long decimals and complex calculations. The model relies on raising the age-structured matrix to the power of the number of years one wants to predict. Over many years, hand calculations become tedious and nearly impossible, especially with scenarios where the limit over time is infinity, meaning no steady state is reached. Computers are essential to complete these calculations for many years into the future. Additionally, more time steps can be added to the model when using a computer because the calculations do not have to be done by hand, as matrix multiplication can become cumbersome, especially with many rows and columns. Computers enable these calculations to be performed quickly, accurately, and to more precise level, making them a powerful tool for enhancing the usefulness of this model. I learned to have an appreciation for this computing technology during this project, as it is a lot of work to solve out all these problems by hand. The model could be used as a part of a solution to many global problems like population growth and demographic analysis. The model can help in showing age distributions of communities like Japan, which have an excessive number of older people. The model could be used to predict the future of the country's age distribution. It also can help understand birth rates, death rates, and help with overpopulation. Conservation biology/hunger. The model can also help, as in the fishing scenario, in monitoring populations of endangered species affected by climate change, or even populations of invasive species to keep them in control. Like in the fishing scenario, the model can help with resource management and maximizing the amount of food people can have, reducing hunger. Disease modeling. The model can be used to show the death and reproduction rates of people affected by certain diseases. This can show the effect of people across different age groups and what the future population would look like. The oversight of these models to the unpredictability of real life in our changing world could cause the models to exacerbate problems. While yes, they provide a strong guideline to follow to help with problems like overfishing and wildlife conservation, these guidelines could easily be wrong or change very quickly in the world. Following these guidelines exactly could lead to overfishing or not enough fish protected. This applies to all the situations listed previously. It is important to use many different types of models for these situations to double-check that the provided guidelines take into account many different factors and provide the best advice. To conclude, I learned a lot about linear algebra's applications in the real world and its benefits as well as disadvantages. Nonetheless, with cautious consideration and complementary approaches, this model can contribute significantly to solutions for pressing issues. Thank you.